Hello there, kia ora. I'm Paul, and this is this week's The News. The upper half of the North Island is this weekend in recovery mode after the impact of Cyclone Tam. The storm caused severe damage to major infrastructure, including power, internet, and phone service cutoffs, with roads also being damaged. And some parts of the far north are expected to be without power for up to 3 days. Auckland suffered power cuts and minor flooding. The Bay of Plenty saw major road closures, as did the Coromandel, and Tairāwhiti is under a heavy rain warning, as repair crews work tirelessly around the clock to reinstate services. Said the Prime Minister on Thursday afternoon, seen here finding out that he's too slow when going low with Mike Hosking. Look, what I'm saying to you is inflation is well under the 7% it used to be, and it's so weird that builders are looking for work. If only there was something that we could do as the government before he didn't declare a state of emergency. At least this way we're bringing some much needed financial relief to those impacted by lowering their power bill for days. New Zealand supermarket chain Pack and Save has unveiled new signage which has confused racists all over the country. The sign reads "Proudly NZ owned," and underneath the phrase "Nō Aotearoa" can be seen. In Te Reo Māori, the phrase means from or of New Zealand, but racists are claiming the term is referencing government policy and Facebook comment threads by removing the language. When asked what the Macron above the O means, Brian Kennedy replied with, "I thought Macrons were in the biscuit section." In a rising cost of living crisis, the government has once again tackled the issue head-on as Associate Health Minister Casey Costello, seen here wondering why you're not smoking, demands health staff stop using the term pregnant people. The inclusive term is used to be inclusive, but as Costello said, we include everyone that we consider to be our voting base, and they think including everyone is woke. Speaking of the cost of living crisis, while government ministers have taken every opportunity since being elected to take credit for long expected and planned for drops in inflation after the global pandemic supply issues returned to relative normality, they have been very quiet since it was announced inflation has risen again to 2.5%, which Stats NZ announced earlier this week. The main drivers for this increase was the 3.5% increase in food items, power increases, and rental and rates increases. This has been coupled with new Treasury forecasts which show a slowdown in expected growth markers, meaning a longer, harder period for New Zealanders financially. Said Finance Minister Nicola Willis, seen here showing you her impression of Eric Cartman and his friend Miss Jennifer Lopez. Can you imagine how bad it would have been if we had competent financial management in place? But someone has to pay for tax cuts for the landlords and tobacco companies. Embattled Elam MP Hamish Campbell, seen here with the two young NAP members who in 2022 were outed as being behind a massive amount of gendered abusive messages sent to female politicians, has confirmed he is, in fact, a senior elder within the mysterious sect known as the 2x2s, a group currently under investigation by both the FBI and the New Zealand Police, which this morning revealed several new investigations due to 27 reported allegations over counts of sexual abuse. Initially, Campbell claimed he had an association with the group through family, but after multiple sources came forward, he admitted his position of power within the organisation. Said a spokesperson for the Prime Minister's office, "We stand by our vetting process, and as you know, we don't let ideology drive our decisions. But we're still looking at canning RSE, demanding pregnant people be called pregnant women, considering Winston's penis bathroom police, and putting a conservative Christian in charge of abortion access." Health Minister Simeon Brown, seen here talking to the dwarf doc from Snow White because he thought the dude worked at Nelson Hospital, has hit out at plans for salaried medical professionals to undertake a 24-hour strike in May over pay rates. While incorrectly claiming medical staff were paid exponentially more than they are, which is still on the lower end of the scale for the work they do in other regions like Queensland, Brown said he was upset that medical professionals would use patients as bargaining chips because they wouldn't accept a pay rise lower than the rate of inflation like they made minimum wage earners deal with. "Look, it's not acceptable," he said, "to put people's medical care at risk and use them as bargaining tools, unless you're the government that's underfunding the health sector and putting people's lives at risk for the greater good, or promising life-saving cancer drugs that you decide not to fund in the budget, or to save money for those landlords and tobacco companies." Immigration New Zealand is calling the new Golden Visa program a success after almost 50 US millionaires tried to escape the hellstorm they created in the United States, have applied for the fast-track program to Kiwi citizenship, with 7 having been accepted so far. Said Immigration Minister Erica Stanford, seen here wondering if this is a hobbit hole, those 7 people are bringing in $35 million of investment to the country, and all it will cost us is dealing with them for a week a year. And of course, a small gratuity to the party that made it possible for them to be here wouldn't go astray. The National Party this week celebrated a win for the Labour Party in its fight against violent crime. At an Auckland press conference with Auckland-based media where the Prime Minister told reporters they needed to get out of their bubble in Wellington sometimes, and an admission from Police Minister Mark Mitchell that gang numbers were increasing and meeting self-imposed police number targets was going to be challenging, they also celebrated recently released crime data which saw a drop in victimisation from violent crime. The data set, collected from February 2023 to February 2024, the majority of which time period saw Labour in power and before the implementation of National Party policy, was seen as a success by the government, despite ignoring research and data which says that their changes will cause crime rates to increase. The government has also announced a $13 million investment into a new tourism campaign targeting markets like the United States, China, Australia, and Germany, which is expected to net 23,000 extra visitors to the country, said Louise Upston, Minister for Tourism, seen here finding out she didn't get Lady Gaga tickets but Judith Collins did. With an investment of around $550 per tourist, while it may not seem that cost-effective, it's only slightly more expensive than waiting for an Easter sale from Jetstar and just buying 23,000 return flights and giving them away to Australians. Labour's Kieran McAnulty, seen here really chuffed that you did that thing that you've been putting off because you were anxious about it, but you did it and you should be proud of yourself, just like Kieran is proud of you, has said that the Labour Party is prepared for a snap election should one be called. Labour isn't alone in this, though, with New Zealand First, one of the coalition partners, also preparing for a snap election, which is the political equivalent of a horror movie phone call coming from inside the House. Political pundits expect the change of Deputy Prime Minister roles to be the start of more vocal pushback from New Zealand First towards the rest of the coalition, since Peters knows his party does better when seen as opposition. But since Peters' current voters think they're going to take the country back with a man who has spent half of the past decade as Deputy Prime Minister, this means the stuntery and buffoonery will need to increase to be viable, and political pundits seem to think that there's a limit to how much Luxon will take before he snaps and calls a snap election. However, Luxon has shown by his masterful negotiations with his coalition partners that he's willing to burn the country to the ground to keep power. So only time will tell how this unfolds. The ACT Party has come under fire for using an AI-generated image of a happy Māori couple created with a specific prompt to create images of Māori to promote what it thinks are successes in its government's policy to reduce the cost of living. Said a spokesperson for the party, there are no actual rules yet around the use of artificially intelligent created images for electioneering, and this way is both much more cost-effective and a lot easier than finding actual Māori people who would pose for us, let alone support the party. Millionaire toy company founder and Donald Trump supporter Nick Mowbray has revealed he's facing a tariff bill of over $3 billion under Donald Trump's tariff regime. Mowbray, who manufactures plastic toys in China, is facing a 145% tariff on all goods he exports to the US. Recently, Mowbray has jumped on the anti-Benjamin Doyle bandwagon based on selective content taken out of context, tried to justify Elon's Nazi salutes, criticised the school lunch program, criticised Guy Williams for asking David Seymour questions the media wouldn't, reposted content from former Free Speech Union members pushing the racist Great Replacement theory, and InfoWars' Alex Jones. So the New Zealand media has naturally given Mowbray as much sympathy as possible. The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, Brendan Horsley, seen here watching the Watchers, has looked into a complaint from former Radio New Zealand reporter Mick Hall that the NZIS had been investigating him after it was revealed Hall had breached editorial standards and was accused of publishing a false Russian sub-narrative into a Reuters story. The investigation into Hall found there were no concerns of foreign interference, and Horsley found the steps entirely appropriate for the spy agency. Said Horsley, hopefully now the NZSIS can look at the work of people like Counterspin's Calvin Alp and Chantal Baker and see if their pro-Russian stances and trips to the area might be a bit of a red flag with a little yellow sickle. Consultation is open for the refresh into the education system's reproduction and sexuality guidelines, which Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters has decried as woke, and former ACT Party President Tim Jargo has called an annoying tool which stops me doing my thing. Education Minister Erica Stanford, seen here blowing her own horn, well, bassoon, went through great pains to make sure the media knew that the process and consultation documents had not been influenced by New Zealand First MPs who have been vocal opponents to giving young people tools on how to recognise healthy relationships and accept each other for who they are. David Seymour, seen here trying his best to sing opera, is coming under fire for the cost of his charter school project this week, which comes with an approximate price tag of $43,500 per child, having only got 215 children enrolled across the 7 current charter schools. This is a cost of 5 times that of the standard rate that a state school would spend on a child annually. Said Seymour, yes, we are dedicated to cutting wasteful spending, like school lunches, but if I spend it, it's not wasteful. Why would anyone want to check that out? How about I get those guys with the highest public servant salaries at my Ministry of Regulation to look into how you're wasting money by asking me to be accountable? Former ACT Party President Tim Jago has announced he would be seeking his conviction to be lessened to home detention and a miscarriage of justice be ruled in his case because he feels the jury didn't take long enough to deliberate and that the judge had been mean to him. While many are calling this an abuse of the legal system and a way to minimise the harm he caused, especially after using his connection to the ACT Party to justify elongated name suppression, those who 2 weeks ago were screaming about a blue swirl and out-of-context images and comments on an old Benjamin Doyle post, claiming they were just worried about the children, have remained oddly quiet on the topic. Concerns have been raised in the United States after Harvard University received demands from the president, who once ran a pyramid scheme selling what he called university courses, to allow an overseer to audit all courses, only allow ones he authorises, or run the risk of funding cuts. In response, New Zealand Tertiary Education Minister Penny Simmonds, seen here realising the Prime Minister has given Andrew Bailey a promotion after 2 incidents involving inappropriate behaviour where she was demoted for following government guidelines to slash expenses at any cost, said, universities should be free to promote a diversity of opinions and encourage students to explore new ideas and perspectives. And that's why we're forcing all campuses here to allow the Free Speech Union, who weirdly only platform far-right speakers and refuse to acknowledge the harm hate speech has, to be led onto campuses, instead of allowing campuses to run independently and without concern of governmental meddling. On Wednesday, large parts of the lower South Island were impacted by a series of unfortunate events that resulted in widespread internet outages. While a construction crew had accidentally sliced through the backup fibre cables, rats had managed to chew through the primary supply cable for the internet. A spokesperson for One New Zealand has said that they're working on ways to make the cables less appealing to rats and were thinking that coating them in cheese as insulation may not have been the smartest move. Former Labour Party leader Andrew Little, seen here showing you the definition of a zaddy and hoping you don't let Winston see or have it explained to him, has announced he plans to run for the Wellington mayoralty at this year's local body elections. But he has some stiff competition. Owner of the Post, Sinead Boucher, has said, as media we're clearly impartial, which is why we're putting together this right-wing bunch of influential Wellingtonians to not influence the election outcome at all. And we're not sure Little is our kind of person. While Wellington Mayor Tory Whanau has said, I have a lot of respect for the work that Little did in Parliament, especially when he stepped aside and let Jacinda Ardern take over. And finally, beloved character actor Sam Neill, known for his roles in Hunt for the Wilder People, Peaky Blinders and Event Horizon, this week had a heartwarming reunion with a star from his most well-known film, Jurassic Park. In a sweet tribute that came with an apology to director Steven Spielberg, Neill showed his co-star his farm and the unique scenery of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Here, let's take a look.
You want to dig up some bones today? Okay, let's do it.
And that's this week's The News. Make sure you're looking after yourself wherever you are out there, and we'll catch you all next time. Hey, thanks for checking out today's video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe so you get more updates as we go along and deal with these guys for the rest of the year.